You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Welcome back to Arsenal Pass, episode 100. Brendan, episode 100. We've hit the three digits, the three figures. Did you think we'd get to this point?
Yeah, I did. And I am happy to announce that we are retiring Arsenal Pass after episode 100. Just wanted to end with a bang. Okay, so I just want to shout out our audio editor, Hoodwill. I think it's at Hoodwill on Twitter. I don't know his Twitter's on that, but I told him that, and I let it sit for a few hours, and I sent it to a group chat, and then he DMs me like 4 hours later. He's like, "Hey man, can we talk about the pod?"
Yeah, because he said, "What are you doing something special?" And Brendan's like, just snaps off immediately. Yeah, we're retiring the pod after episode 100. That's all right. Will, we love your work, man. But we're not retiring the pod. To 100 more episodes, want to say a big thank you to all of the Arsenal Pass listeners, to our patrons, to everyone who's supported us over the nearly 2 years now. Brendan, we started with Monarch previous season. We've now gone through Monarch, Tales of Aria, Everfest, Uprising, Dynasty, and now Outsiders. This is our sixth set that we've covered as the Arsenal Pass podcast, and it's been a pleasure to do so. And I'm looking forward to. We've got a couple of really exciting things over the next couple of weeks. We've got our limited set review, as we always do. This will be our fourth limited set review. We started it with Monarch, and we've continued it through, and we love delivering those. We've got that coming out early next week. Look out for that. We've got a little bit of a giveaway we'll talk about soon, and we've just got more flesh and blood stuff to come from ourselves. So yeah, just want to say a big thank you, Brendan.
Yeah, long way away from when we met casting the Blitz calling in 2020. I don't know how many of you listening to this have seen that, but it's a gem for sure.
The gem. All right, Brendan. In terms of what we're covering in episode 100, we are going to be talking about Outsiders, of course. We can't not be. We're going to just dive into our first take on Outsiders for Classic Constructed, what we're what we're excited about, what we're looking at. We're going to cover the new heroes, how we're sort of thinking we might approach building some of these decks for the first time, some of the cards that are really standing out to us, and just a really high-level look at Outsiders' first impressions for Classic Constructed. Of course, it's really early. The full previous season is just wrapped up, and I think everything but the Fabled at this point is available to view. If you don't want, spoilers beyond what you've already seen, there's not too much, to be honest, that's come out. I think most of the key cards we previewed during the previous season, I think, are a couple of Majestics and Commons. We already knew about a few reprints as well, which we alluded to last week on the show. So if you are trying to deathly avoid spoilers, I guess, for some of the cards that you may not know about yet, then maybe listen to this pod next week after the pre-release. But we are going to dive into a lot of the cards that have been shown, and that's going to be episode 100. Before that, Brennan, talk this week in Flesh and Blood. It's a bit of a quieter time. I personally have played no Flesh and Blood in the last week. It's been my kind of first full week off in Flesh and Blood for a very long time, because after Worlds I said I'm taking a break, but then Dynasty dropped and I did not take a break. But since the Calling Auckland, I have not played a single game of Flesh and Blood, so it's been nice to have a little bit of a break before Outsiders.
I've been trying to wrap my mind around these freaking spoilers because they were dropped so closely in succession. I actually want to put out a question there for the listeners, and especially the people on YouTube. Let us know in the comments below. Do you think a condensed spoiler season like we got in Outsiders is ideal? So everything being spoiled in, let's say, around 2 to 3 days, not counting, some of the early ones that were spoiled. Those are outliers. Do you think that that's ideal, or would you rather have it spread out across a longer time period? Just wondering, because I know for me, like, I was diving into spoilers, I was like, oh my god, I was trying to like parse them and understand them like all at once. I'm like, I'm gonna have to come back to this so many times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I felt the same. I did a bit of a real deep dive on the Monday evening once a lot of things had sort of dropped through, and tried to get my head around stuff. I was trying to keep up as it went, but it was really quick, and a lot of, I'd say like 60% of the spoilers probably, or preview cards, came out when I was quiet times, when I was sleeping, or before bed, or just not long after waking up. So in the mornings with breakfast for that sort of weekend, I was like, okay, what do we got? And honestly, I've got to say, from a personal standpoint, like, I'm really interested to hear what people think, what our listeners think, what Arsenal Pass listeners think. But I really enjoyed this more condensed season. I think I get really distracted over the kind of like week and a half, and it is, to be fair, it is really cool. I really loved last time where it was like we've had these teased out. You get these heroes drop, and I actually personally preferred it this way. How we heard about the heroes really early. I think even like around Dynasty, right? We knew what the heroes were going to be for the set, and then we got these sort of like drips of like spoilers coming through preview cards. We saw Bonds of Ancestry, we saw the Inertia, Blood Rot, Frailty tokens, and then we get to this point where it's like just 3 days of like all the excitement. And maybe I want like 5 days, but I did find it a bit easier to digest, and I know that I'm going to get some work done this week, so that's exciting.
Yeah.
So yeah, as Brendan says, drop your comments. Move on to the news, Brendan. And first thing, we dropped our preview card. If you didn't see our little short that we popped up, go and check it out. Our preview card is interesting. I'm genuinely interested to see if it's going to see much play, because I think our kind of first take, in all honesty, Brendan, was not the most powerful card we've had in a preview season before. But we're probably due a less powerful card, so we'll see how it goes. But if you haven't seen Down and Dirty, cool name by the way, go and check it out.
Bonus points because it did piss off some Illusionist players for sure. I think that a lot of outsiders...
Some people were like tilting.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of outsiders has been tilting Illusionist players. Honestly, the people in the worst spot right now are Fatigue players, if those people exist, by the way. But yeah, I mean, Down and Dirty is definitely down and dirty when it comes to a very good card, or at least a sideboard card against Illusionist as a popper.
Yeah, but we didn't talk about it too much because we just did a quick short. That was kind of the directive from LSS this previous season, was if we can really push content through shorts and stuff. I noticed people did these really expansive videos, which made sense for some of the cards and heroes that people got to reveal. But one of the things we didn't harp on too much is this idea that you can hold a popper in your arsenal for multiple turns. Sometimes you're playing and it's really awkward trying to like float the 6 attack. It's really obvious, but putting a card in arsenal, that's just pretty normal, right? And you can hold it for a couple of turns and still play out your game plan. So I think the card is a bit more powerful than I thought, and I'm interested to see kind of its place in the game. Skirmish Season 6, Brendan, was announced by LSS. I think this had already been floating around in the retailer info, the classic fabtcg.com. It's announced, but it's not announced. But now Skirmish Season 6 has been announced. It's running from April 8th to 23rd. The formats are going to be, I want to say, well, actually prizes first. So there is Coldfoil Azaleas, which James White had actually let everyone know about at Worlds that Azalea was coming for the next Skirmish Season as the prize. There's these Rainbow Foil Azuris, Rainbow Foil Riptides, and Rainbow Foil Arachne Solitary Confinement, plus these Razor's Edge playmats, which look freaking awesome, by the way. And it is going to be Blitz, constructed, and sealed. So, stores can choose to run sealed with top 8 draft, which I think is really cool. Or they can choose to run sealed all the way through, or they can do Blitz. So I'm hoping to get a mix. As everyone who listens to Afterpass knows, me and Brendan are very excited about Limited. So I'm keen to play some more Limited.
I would say the Skirmish Season for me is conditional on if the format's good. I think if the format's not good, or at least it's on par with Uprising in terms of enjoyability, I probably would skip Skirmish Season. But if it's anywhere close to like some of the other sets that I've enjoyed, like Tales of Aria, Welcome to Wraith, I'm definitely going to play Skirmish Season. I'm not sure about you if you're just going to play no matter what.
I'll probably play. I mean, I'm really hopeful that this limited format is going to be a good one. So I'm probably pretty committed to playing any sealed ones that are in my sort of area. My first kind of take, just doing some notes for a couple of podcasts we've got dropping over the next week for Limited, is that I think this limited format is going to be very interesting and very good. So we'll see. And LSS have promised us, and they've never promised us a good limited set before, Brendan, obviously. So
never.
We love you guys. All right. Well, on the back of that, we do have another so we do have our Outsiders limited set review coming. It will be dropping earlier in the week. It'll be dropping at the start of the week as opposed to end of the week, middle of the week, like we do with this pod normally. So Arsenal Pass episode 101, the Outsiders limited review, will be up early. But also have an announcement. Got another podcast that's coming for this limited season, called Limited Time Only, focusing on the limited side of the game through this Outsiders limited season. This is something I've wanted to do for a while. Wanted to do it for the last season. Logistically, we just couldn't get to it. But we've got episode 1. I've got Yuanji coming on to break down how to win your sealed pre-release, basically. We're going to talk all things sealed and pre-release with Outsiders. So be sure to check that out. That'll be coming next week about this time, maybe a little bit earlier, so you can get it for your pre-release. Have a quick listen. And of course, you will have me and Brennan waxing lyrical on our grades for the limited format, and probably getting a few wrong. It's always fun, isn't it, Brendan?
Yeah.
Usually it's me that gets it wrong, to be honest.
Wondering if it's yeah. I mean, in Uprising for sure. I wonder if there's going to be any pile decks here. Just looking at the weapons that are available. We do have Ranger. We do have Ranger coming back into a limited set. Ranger historically a bit sensitive, I guess, to pile and fatigue, but we do have daggers. So yeah, fatigue, dagger, pile. I just love when people think that pile is like an effective deck in the early days of a limited set. It makes it really fun on the other side.
We'll definitely be talking about it now in the episode 1 of limited time only and sort of strategies for pre-release. But one thing I'll give you a bit of a spoiler is that we have Benji in the set and we have Stealth in the set. So it is going to be harder to deny damage and use your cards as efficiently as you could with pile decks in the past, I think. So there's a one for free. Get ready for your pre-release. 100 episode giveaway, Brendan. While we're here as well, we do have a bit of a giveaway. We don't really do giveaways too much on Arsenal Pass, but we've hit episode 100. We're nearly 2 years in. We do have a quick giveaway. So Brendan already asked a question about what you thought of this this Outsiders preview season and what you'd like to see. I'm going to extend that as well. All you need to do to get into the draw for this 100 episode giveaway is just drop a comment on YouTube and throw a like on the video and just let us know what you also like about Arsenal Pass as well. Or you can just answer Brendan's question. Any comments will go in the draw to win this 100 episode giveaway. We've got this lovely Outsiders map, to celebrate the launch of Outsiders. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that, me holding that up. We've also got a Coalfoil Benji, very appropriate for right now, and of course an Arsenal Pass resource token. So make sure you leave a like on the video, drop your what you like about Arsenal Pass, or you can answer Brendan's great question about how you want the preview season to look.
I feel like there should be a double entry if you submit a review.
Go on then, throw it away. How do we do that?
We'll just look at go to ratethispodcast.com/Arsenal Pass and we can track it through there. If you've submitted a review already, sorry, too bad. But if you want to submit a new review, you get 2x the entry. We'll do it 2 times the weight just to make it fair. Reviews are super, super important to our podcast and honestly have contributed to so much success over the recent history. So if you have submitted a review already, just know you have our thanks from our deepest hearts.
Very true. And then we can bring back the Google reviews, which we haven't done in a long time, Brendan.
Yes, and I have to add an addendum onto that. There's the funnier a review is, the better.
But 5 stars, obviously. Well, we're almost done with the plugging. Last one, just big thanks to the Arsenal Pass patrons. And up on Patreon, we've just dropped a new Patreon-exclusive podcast, as well as a full Icelander deep dive on the deck that myself, Dan, and Dave played at the Calling Auckland. You can go and find our full Cyborg guide. We dive into some matchups, including how we played the Fatigue matchup, our full plan in that. The list and all the Cyborg plans are there. I think Icelander's not going anywhere. I'm going to ask you once we get into the main topic, Brendan, about where you see constructed, because you did infamously make the claim that by the World Championship, I think you said by Baltimore even, that Icelander would not be.
It's not looking great on that one.
Yeah, I didn't want to misquote you, but I remember it basically being negative about Icelander.
We'll see. I could still get lucky, right? I could still get lucky, but looking at current data,
Michael Hamilton will be there.
It's not looking great. He could switch off. I might have to psy-op him into maybe picking a different deck, because if he wins with Icelander, it's going to look really bad for me.
All right. No Commander Cookout this week, as we are going to dive straight into our main topic on Outsiders and Classic Constructed first takes. But if you do want to get your question for the Commander Cookout, please do so. We've definitely got some spots open for some great questions. You can either email this to us at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com. You can drop them in the YouTube comments below. Maybe that could be your entry for the draw. Or if you're a part of the Patreon Discord, you can drop your question in the channel there. Any other way you want, tweet at us, whatever it might be. Brendan.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into our first takes on Outsiders and Class Constructed. We're going to do this with a little bit of structure. We're going to go through the heroes or the classes, I guess, that are presented in the set, and then just I guess go through it that way. But I guess first thing I want to say is, these are me and Brendan's first takes. We've had a couple of days to look at maximum and digest the preview cards so far. We've thought about what might happen in Class Constructed, but this is very early first takes. We're going to keep this pretty high level. We're going to try and not go into too much detail, although that is difficult with myself and Brendan for sure. And just give sort of our impressions and what are the things that we're looking at to do with, maybe some early testing with Outsiders or decks that we want to build, things we're excited about, and just cards that look really, really interesting, either be for power level or for build around reasons. So I don't know, Brendan, anything to say before we get into Assassin?
No, I mean, I'm very happy to see Assassin in the set, right? Finally flushing out the class. Kind of feels like where Illusionist was prior to Everfest. So the additional Assassin cards are very welcome at this point. Arachne, it was a cool concept, but didn't really execute in terms of like constructed viability. And with the release of Outsiders, we could totally see that flipped on its head.
It's going to be really interesting to see the the clash of, or I guess the coming together of the Dynasty Assassin cards and the Outsiders Assassin cards. Because I guess first thing let's kind of talk about is like what looks good about Assassin in this set. And I mean, the kind of first thing that stands out is like a lot of stealth, right? Like that's the kind of thing that kind of, you see a lot of that keyword stealth on these assassin cards. If people aren't familiar with what stealth is yet, stealth, as Alessio pointed out, does nothing but stealth, but it is a keyword that allows you to do other things, interact with it, such as Azuri, who allows you to, put a 2-cost card, 2-cost or less, face up, and return a stealth card from the chain link on the bottom of the deck. So you can do that, of course, with the keyword stealth, but stealth itself doesn't actually do anything. Very quick to point out.
In Magic with Ninjutsu, the card goes back to hand, right?
It does.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yeah.
This is Ninjutsu at the bottom of the deck. I mean, I just gotta heuristic it into some other, because the freaking text box on Azuri is just. I mean, I did a short about Azuri, and I think I had to read it like 10 times before I actually did it without stumbling a word.
It was also half the short was just you reading the text box.
Yeah, at least.
So, first question for you, because this has been a Twitter discourse. We've had two camps. Azuri's broken and Azuri's terrible. Brendan, where do you stand? Is Azuri broken?
So if I was a betting man, you made me pick, I would say Azuri's terrible. You would? Okay, good.
I'm not saying it is.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it is. But if I had to fall on one side of that conversation, I think it's more likely to be more unplayable than broken. I think what you've got to remember about the Azuri ability is that it costs you 2 cards to present a card. So even if you're putting something great with a really relevant on-hit effect like a Command and Conquer, right? That's the card you stealth in and swap. You've used 2 cards for your Command and Conquer. And yes, it's harder to defend because your opponent doesn't know this is necessarily coming. But at the same time, if they wanted to trade 2 cards for your 2 cards, they could have just blocked with 2 cards.
Yeah, I think that so if I have to pick between the two extremes, like, is it broken or is it terrible? I definitely sound terrible. I think it will be playable. And I just don't see it being a top deck in class constructed with like the kind of stuff we see happening and with tier 1 decks right now. This just doesn't look like it can totally compete. And that hero ability, while it's adorable, just like you talked about, it's very expensive. I do like the design though. The design it's very fun, and I particularly like the weapons. Like this is kind of a new concept, but these nerve scalpels, orbitoclasts and spider spites and scalp peelers, like it's like a toolbox of things to potentially have in the sideboard. I think that's a whole nother conversation of like what's the opportunity cost of like having multiple sets of weapons in your sideboard to try to deal with like what you're expecting and how many can you potentially add. But the design itself is really, really cool.
Yeah, let's talk about that. And one thing before we talk about the weapons, I want to ask you is, people have compared a lot, basically this idea of Azuri at very minimum is going to be annoying. It's going to be something like a bit of a learning curve to how to play against it. And it reminds people a lot of Dorinthia is kind of some of the comparisons I've seen. There's going to be a learning curve to how to defend it, how to play into it. Do you think those are like apt kind of comparisons?
Definitely. That will definitely be a thing. And I think just like Dorinthia, there'll be players who swear by it but never put up results,
Unless your name's Josh Lau, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, he's something else to say.
What do we talk about these weapons? Because there is, like you say, that makes flavorful sense, right? An assassin with a lot of tools to get the job done. You talked about Nerve Scalpel. Nerve Scalpel, we'll just quickly touch on the Nerve Scalpel, is the one that gives reaction. It's reaction cards, right? Yeah, reaction cards -1. Orbitoclast is the one that gives non-attack actions, and of course, Spider's Bite gives attack actions, and then Scale Peeler is equipment -1 when they're defending. So you've got a lot of different options, right? You can play one of each. You can play Spider's Bite and a Nerve Scalpel. You could play an Orbitoclast and a Scale Peeler, whatever you want to do. And I think like you say, depending on the matchup, you might play 4 different daggers or maybe even 5 different daggers in your 80 card loadout.
Yeah, I think of the 3 new ones we got, Orbitoclast is the best one, giving non-attack actions -1 while defending. It's just significant when you're playing against a deck that's maybe trying to defend you out, right? And they might have a higher density of non-attack actions. I mean, Spider's Bite already affecting those attack actions is a very, very good weapon for Assassin. I think that Nerve Scalpel with the reactions and Scale Peeler with equipment, just not nearly as good, but maybe Scale Peeler in something like Blitz could be more effective, right? Where that armor kind of has a higher level of efficacy because of lower life totals in condensed games.
The only thing I think about Scale Peeler is is it a bit of a nombo with like the piercing? in terms of, people are more likely to commit that to defense equipment, to just see out that scale peeler to avoid. But whereas like Nerve Scalpel is one that I actually see could be a good sideboard option into, these potential heavy defensive decks. I mean, Riptide comes to mind, right, which we'll talk about. So yeah, I do agree though. I think like Orbiter class, like you say, is like the one that kind of stands out.
Yeah, definitely.
What about, I guess, in terms of, some of the equipment? Of course, we've got the Redback Shroud. Do you think that's like a nice complement to what we've already seen with Black Tech Whisperers and the headpiece?
Not really. I think that, so I'm actually kind of going off of something I saw on Twitter. I haven't verified the source or really investigated myself, but from what I understand, there's actually not very many ways to create the 2 silver tokens that you would be destroying in order to regenerate this or get it back. So it's fine, right? Are you in the same boat, or?
I was surprised that we haven't seen more ways to create currency in this set.
Yeah.
Particularly silver. And so I guess the ways that you're doing it is contract, right? Like, and there's no contract cards in the set. So what you're getting access to from a contract standpoint is not changing. What's changing is your potential payoff, is kind of how it looks like for some of these assassins. But the setup in the form of the contract isn't what you're going to get from this. So it really puts, I guess, Arachne in particular in an interesting situation where how different is the deck going to look? Like, it looks like you're going to get some definite upgrades. There's some really interesting attack reactions. Sorry, there's these new weapon opportunities, of course, and but the stealth cards aren't particularly helpful for Arachne. So yeah, I'm interested to see.
Yeah, I could be wrong. I mean, you're right. It depends. It depends on contract and how. But you just have to compare this against Tunic, right? And it has to be able to beat Tunic on sort of a turn-by-turn value. So if you're able, I don't know, if you're able to generate twice or regenerate it once in 4 turns, and the game is 5 turns long, then yeah, it's better than Tunic, and you should be playing it. But I think it's pretty niche, to be honest, considering that Tunic is doing something somewhat similar and is actually, it doesn't affect only attack reactions in terms of reducing cost. It gives you just a sort of a flat resource.
Yeah, I'm going to default to, I don't really have so much opinion on Redback Shroud just yet. It doesn't seem like you're going to get are you going to get value every 2 turns from this to make it better than Tunic, like Brendan's saying? I don't see that happening. So we'll see. Obviously, it does have Battle Worn, which is relevant. Why don't we talk about just some of the cards that are really interesting to us? Because we could spend ages, we could spend a whole podcast just talking about Assassin and what Arachne could look like, what Azuri could look like. So, I think just high level, my kind of takeaway from Arachne is that it's not going to change too much. Get some upgrades, which is good, and that could be enough to propel it into a really competitive deck. Azuri is going to be a really interesting one, how people build that. Like we talked about the comparisons to Dorinthia, how you use your stealth cards, what are the cards that you're putting into play. There's some really interesting cards like Shakedown. If you haven't seen that, that's the Azuri specialization. The card looks very powerful, right? And attack reactions are going to be really important to the class as a whole, and we get some really new and exciting attack reactions, I think. Razor's Edge, of course, seems to be like the kind of marquee one. That's the 0 for 3. If it has stealth, it gets +3. And then you have some payoffs as well from my standpoint that look really good. Like Sneak Attack to me is a card that looks really exciting. You come with this, yes, it costs 2, but I think in the structure of what we're seeing with Assassin, an attack that costs 2 actually is fine. And potential, you play a reaction on that, you're looking at pushing 7 damage over the top of how your opponent's defended. That card looks quite exciting to me.
Yes. Honestly, when I was looking at Sneak Attack, I was really thinking about Limited as well, because Sneak Attack. Yeah. But in Constructed, this is still very powerful. We're talking about 2 for 7. Shakedown, I think, is just, it seems to be by and far the best card that we've seen for Assassin. And of course, this is a specialization, but this is like, is this better than Command and Conquer? Is kind of my question. This 2 for 6, where when it hits, you're able to, choose red, yellow, or blue, and they banish one of those cards.
And this card is pure fright, is really frightening if you haven't seen what it is. So it's a 2 cost, 6 attack for 3, and it's a Azuri specialization. And it says if you've played or activated an attack reaction in this chain link, Shakedown has when this hits a hero, choose red, yellow, or blue. They reveal their hand, banish a card of the chosen color. Based on what your opponent's playing, you're going to be able to always hit this if they keep cards in hand. So is it better than Command and Conquer? I mean, it's important to remember Azuri's ability is an attack reaction. So if you swap this in with Azuri and it hits, you've hit the clause, you're going to be able to trigger this effect. So you get a card from hand.
You think people are going to pummel this card?
Oh, definitely. People are definitely playing Pummel. I've already seen people on Twitter talking about Pummel and Azuri, like 9 of Pummel and Azuri.
Delete your hand is like the effective text of that.
Yeah, because you don't even need to like. So some of the things I saw people talking about was like, oh, because you don't have to pay the cost, right? So you stealth the card, that's two cards, and then you pitch your Pummel and you pay for the Frostbite or whatever. And I was like, so it's 4 cards for 10 damage, and you take a card from the hand, and if you've got a non-hit effect, I mean, it's pretty relevant. Like, it's interesting. I think Shakedown in the context of Azuri is probably, a card you're more excited about than Command and Conquer.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, you can play defense reactions to Shakedown.
But yeah,
other cards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking about the current meta. It does seem like defense reactions are less than. Yeah, so it's good for sure.
What about other cards? I mean, I'm really interested. We've got these cards that are red line only at rare with Spike with Blood Rot, Spike with Frailty, Spike with Inertia. These attack reactions. I mean, those are cards that look very interesting. I mean, obviously, they only target cards of Stealth, so it's not an Arachne necessarily. I mean, Arachne could choose to play some of these cards as Stealth. I don't know what it might look like. That is something I would like to investigate. Is like, can you play some of these cards with Stealth in Arachne to get the beneficial abilities? Because, like we say, Stealth is not a keyword that does anything in and of itself, but it enables other things, right? So maybe playing some of these stealth attacks enables you to play Spike with Frailty or Spike with Blood Rot and have these really high reaction decks and things like that. But of course, those they're a bit of a nombo with your contract cards. So can you play both lanes? Do you have to choose a lane? That's going to be interesting to see.
The fact these block for 3 is like pretty good, to be honest.
It's really good.
Yeah. And I think the Spike with Blood Rot is generally the best one because Spike with Inertia is like very conditional, and Frailty is going to be better if your opponent potentially has like 2 weapons and their weapons have go again. Where with Blood Rot, it's kind of just like a 1 for 5 most of the time.
Yes, I really like Inertia as a token. I think being able to deny people the ability to arsenal or to, like hold and set up. Yeah, it doesn't have like, it's not as, I get what you're saying. You're saying like 1 for 5, like it's a lot more tangible, right? Like it's going to take a card from your opponent's hand or it's going to deal them 2 damage. That's really tangible. But the Inertia is a lot less tangible. It's hard to understand exactly what that value of that token is going to be, but sometimes it's going to be really, really high. Like it's going to force your opponent to play in completely different ways. It's going to, think about like Crown of Seeds decks, even that's like value added. So I do think Inertia is potentially better than it at first appears.
Yeah, I think Inertia is more conditional on the hero you're playing against, where Blood Rot's, I guess, kind of more like just generally good against everything. But yeah, Inertia, I mean, if you want to just talk about it, specifically you're playing something Icelander, Inertia's super freaking annoying, dude. Like, this card is going to make you not want to. I honestly think that I will not want to play Icelander when I'm facing this kind of deck.
Yeah, unless you're playing against an Azuri who's, one. I don't know if you saw the meme, but it's like, here comes my Command and Conquer or my Shakedown stealth, and it's like that versus like one little Frostbite.
Yeah,
it's quite funny. Of course, the Frostbite token does make it quite awkward. If you can't activate Azuri's attack reaction if there's a Frostbite. I mean, you can, but you got to pay for it.
Yeah, pay for it. Yeah.
That does sort of make the card now worth 3, which is tough. Any other cards specifically in Assassin that you kind of want to touch on? I mean, there are so many of these stealth cards, which is great. I mean, I'm super excited to talk about these 4 limited in particular. I think there's definitely going to be cards that come out during sort of the constructed season. We talk about like Spreading Plague is a really interesting card in particular. I just don't know exactly what that's going to look like just yet. I need to sort of go away and look at Assassin a bit more.
Yeah, honestly, Sneak Attack was definitely the most interesting one for me. Outside of that, I did like Prowl a bit, but I think I was evaluating that more in a limited context. I was like, okay, we've go again, we're getting something +1, great value. But other than that, yeah, I'm not too sure. You talked about Razor's Edge, sort of this is going to be definitely a staple in this deck, right? This 0 for 3, giving stealth attack +3 to at an attack reaction, and the fact that like these attack reactions block for 3 is just super powerful.
Yep. I'm excited to play with Prow, and so Arachne Solitary Confinement looks super fun. I think that's the hero I'm most excited to play
for sure. Yeah,
in Limited.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, for sure. Yeah, definitely. Well, honestly, the freaking ninja cards are ridiculous, which we'll get into.
Before we do that, let's talk a little bit about hybrid cards for Assassin. So any of these hybrid cards that can be played in Assassin. Now Assassin has both prongs of the hybrid cards. They have the Assassin Ninja and the Assassin Ranger cards. First card, I'm going to point out is Death Touch. That card looks pretty ridiculous. It's a 6 attack. And Death Touch can't be played from hand, and it says when this hits a hero, create a Frailty, Inertia, or Blood Rot Pox token under their control, and it costs 1, defense for 2. That first line of text is irrelevant. This Death Touch can't be played from hand.
I know, right?
Just put it in your arsenal, play it next turn. It's still ridiculous. It's still 1 for potentially 8 plus. That is...
Yes, great off tunic. Hayden asked me, he's like, what do you think the pack 1 pick 1 is? And I didn't know it off the top, like the name. And I was like, oh, the 1 for 6, like the Ranger 1 for 6. But I meant the dual class. Like, this card is so freaking good. I know we're talking about constructed, but it extends to constructed. Like, this is 1 for 6. You can be playing this off tunic, and you're right. Like, you're getting a 1 for 8 often here.
Yeah. I mean, I think all the colors are relevant because the breakpoints. So, I think blue is particularly good as well because it's a 1 for, for 4, 2 cards for 4. It has a breakpoint. And if you're able to use those other 2 resources, I don't know, say, for instance, attacking with your weapon, you come in with your weapon, you hit, now your opponent's attack actions defend for 1 less, and all of a sudden you've got this card that's coming in for 6, and they need to block with 3 cards to stop it. It feels pretty good. Like, you're trading your 2 cards for 3 cards at minimum, and, if you're able to attack reaction this or whatever it might be, get this over the line, just the damage threatened is so high. So this card looks really exciting in both Assassin and I think Ranger, which we're about to talk about.
Yeah, imagine you dagger them, make their reactions defend for 1 less, and then you blue Death Touch them, and their Sink Belows and Fade for Scenes and all of those just do not work.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty reasonable. What about, I don't know, have you had any thoughts about these codexes and what that might look like in Assassin?
I'm trying to think about which one I like the most. I think it's the Codex of Frailty. Each hero puts an attack action card from their graveyard face down in their arsenal. Each hero that does discards a card. So you just get to pick your best card out of your graveyard. That's pretty freaking good.
Yeah, so one of the, Death Touch, for instance.
Yeah.
So Codex of, you've got 1 card in hand. It's your Codex of Frailty. You play your Codex of Frailty. You put your Death Touch in your arsenal with your floating resource or your tunic or whatever. You play the Death Touch out, and then you get your Ponder token and you get to arsenal something for end of turn. Codex of Frailty seems really strong to me. That's obviously a really good case for it, but also at the same time, it's a yellow that you can pitch. You know what I mean? It's not. I think these are purposely been printed at yellow for this flexibility of the power and pitch. Imagine if they were blue, they'd be.
Yeah, so it would be
ridiculous.
busted. That's what I was gonna say. It's I think they were printed at yellow because if they were blues, they'd be freaking busted. If they were reds, they could have been printed at reds. I think that yellow is being generous with how powerful something like Codex of Frailty is.
Yeah. And I mean, even Blood Rod, I can see, the similar situation. Okay, I put my Death Touch into my arsenal, and then I play it, and I pass the turn with my Ponder token. My opponent has a Blood, so I'm upper card, and my opponent's got a Blood Rod token. Upper card, it's replacing the Codex for a Blood Rod token, but also I get to enable something like Death Touch or some of the other, an arrow or whatever it is in Ranger. This is an interesting sort of way of doing reload that isn't reload as well. So yeah, I mean, could go on about these cards, but they're really interesting. I mean, the one that's going to come out a lot that people are going to talk about, I want to quickly touch on, Brendan, is Toxicity, because it's as effectively representing a 0 for 5, which is significantly above rate on cards in this game. What do you kind of take? Obviously, there's, it has to hit, but what are your kind of takeaways on Toxicity?
So this is definitely a new area of design. But yeah, this is not the same thing as 0 for 5. 0 for 5 is completely unconditional, right? This is conditional on hit, and that's it's a big deal, to be honest. Basically, this card can be 0 for freaking 0 if you think it's blocked. That's a big deal. It blocks for 2, and yeah, that's important. So the best use case of this is you're giving something dominate, and it's guaranteed to get through, and now the opponent is getting 0 for 5. I think that's the use case we're going to see it in. In terms of the design of a hero just losing 5 life, I'm not sure if it's gonna if it is good enough to be played, it might be really frustrating.
So Toxicity, because we aren't throwing these cards on screen, it's a 0 cost Assassin Ranger action at red, defense for 2. It's at red, yellow, and blue, but we're looking at red. And it says the next Assassin or Ranger attack action card you play this turn gains. When this hits a hero, they lose 5 life, yellows 4, blues 3. And I think so I agree, right? It's really conditional, but if it does hit, it is a 0 for 5, which is, a 1 card for 5, which is huge. But at the same time, I think you can compare this to, Snatch is a 0 for 4 plus. Mm-hmm. Usually people value it around 6, right? The card is usually about 2.53. And then you could look at something like on-hit effects with what's the arrow that deals an extra damage? That's effectively a 0 for 5. The one you lose 1 life for hits. Searing Shot.
Mhm.
So there is other comparisons, I think, to make this. People were comparing this to Mothrian Skies, and my issue with comparing this to anything like Mothrian Skies is Mothrian Skies enables you to do certain strategies. It gives you attack go again, enables strategies, it turns on your hero ability. So I think really look at this comparative to a card like I'm really bad on card names today, Brent. I've been looking at so much Outsiders, I've forgotten old card names. The 0 for 4 Rune Chance. Revelant Runeblood. Revelant Runeblood with Viserys hero ability is 0 for 5, right? But, you don't have to hit. It just makes the damage. So toxicity, I think on first glance looked like it could be a bit of a problem, but, I think you really have to push it through. So you have to work to make this card good.
I just want to point that out. That was like 2 or 3 times you forgot the card name, and then you asked me, and then while asking me, you just remembered it.
Well, because I just remembered that I asked you, and that was a mistake.
I was like, I'm like thinking, should I tell him my name? You're just like, oh yeah, Searing Shot.
I'm just biding time. I'm just biding my time.
Sandbagging me.
Sorry, I apologize. Anything else you want to talk about before we move on to talk about Ranger?
No, I just don't think that. Yeah, I mean, toxicity is not the same thing as Mothrian Skies. Like Mothrian Skies does like infinitely more things in terms of Rune Blade. You're turning on your weapon. You're getting go again. I mean, it's just way, way, way different. But I do think that toxicity is a dangerous card in terms of design. Like, I'm not sure if we're going to see a lot more of this effect, and I think this is kind of we're going to be dipping our toes in the water with this lose X life thing.
Yeah, I think pushing to a 1 card for 5, no matter how conditional it is a design space that I think they'll be very careful around. And like I said, we've kind of seen it before. It's not new. Like 0 for 5 was shown with Searing Shot very early on, but conditions, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's your first kind of take on Ranger? I mean, I'd been claiming to everyone that I was now a Riptide main when I saw just Riptide for the first time, even before I knew what the hero ability was. I'll be honest, Brendan, I'm not sure I'll be a Riptide main.
Yeah, doesn't look like your kind of deck, to be honest. What do I think about Ranger? Well, the quivers are absolute free rolls, and that's a huge buff to Ranger. And I don't think that can be understated at all.
Let's talk about those. So we now have a new type of equipment, Quiver. These don't take up, well, they do take up an equipment zone, but bows are two-handed anyway, so you were never using that as a ranger if you're playing a bow. There's some implications if you're not playing bow, but then why the heck are you holding a quiver? You know what I'm saying? But of course, we have Quiver of the Rustling Leaves, which is the Majestic. We have Crow's Nest, and we have Driftwood Quiver, the last two being the commons. Each of those, Crow's Nest being a Azalea specialization, Driftwood Quiver being a Riptide specialization. And yeah, like you say, they're just free extra pieces that Rangers didn't have before. If you haven't seen these, Rustling Leaves is a instant, cost 3. So it starts in play, of course, because it's equipment. You destroy it, reveal the top card of your... Actually, you don't. Yeah, you do destroy it afterwards. So instant 3 cost, reveal the top card of your deck. If it's an arrow, put it face up into your arsenal and destroy Quiver of the Rustling Leaves. Like, that's just a one-time hit. That's something Ranger didn't have previously, right?
Yeah, and I think that one's decent, right? But I think Quiver of Abyssal Depths, the legendary, which says instant 3, destroy Quiver of Abyssal Depths, shuffle up to 3 arrows, your 3 best cards, with different names from your graveyard into your deck. I mean, the fact that it says different names is really important. If it didn't do that, discard.
Reread in the ledger, please.
Yeah, it would be busted. But it still is super good, and it's really good against something that Ranger has traditionally struggled against, which has been more defensive decks and decks to try to fatigue it out.
Yeah, I completely forgot about the legendary, I'll be honest, because I was looking at the next line down. I remembered that it was there, but I just forgot that, we're getting a legendary quiver. It's cool. I like it. Also, the art on these quivers is... I'm a big fan of the art.
Honestly, the art of most of the set, it does feel like a step up. It's very, very good.
It feels like... it just brings you into Outsiders and the Pits, I think, in a really cool way, which I'm super excited about for like cracking these cards at pre-release and just like, looking at these cards and feeling, like I'm there playing in the Pits.
Yeah. So talk to me about Riptide. What kind of deck, not in limited, right? So in constructed, what kind of deck do you think Riptide is? Is it a like control-y fatigue deck? Because if you look at those traps, they're very disruptive. It's weird because like it's kind of a non-bow to be defending a lot, but then also by doing so, you are dealing 1 damage to your opponent via Riptide's ability, which is whenever a trap you control triggers, deal 1 damage to the attacking hero. Like, do you think Riptide's a mid-range deck or like full kind of control defend Also has 19 health, by the way. Very important to note.
Yeah, 19 and 38 in class constructed. So the kind of problem I have with Riptide in terms of what does this deck look like. So I think my first take is, if I want to play defense reactions and, traps to trigger Riptide's ability, get the value out of Riptide's ability, the second text on Riptide's ability, then I think trying to do a hybrid approach is terrible. Like, it's just time after time, this game has shown that playing a significant number of defense reactions and attacks is not particularly good. A lot of like Guardian did that early on and got really caught up with, these kind of like awkward hands, and it was difficult to execute. And that was with a class that had a really good weapon that it could dump resources into, that had a hero ability that could dump resources into, and had like threatening attacks for second cycle. And I don't think Riptide has that as much. So I think that second line of text makes you want to really play a heavily defensive deck with a lot of traps to trigger this ability. On the flip side of that, like how do you win the game? And that's kind of been, I think, what people have said so far. People I know have been like jumping on Talishar and booting up some Riptide and being like, I don't know how you win games.
Yeah.
So what is the first?
Sorry, he's also printed in a set that is like very anti-fatigue. Like there's like even generic anti-fatigue deck cards in this set. So yeah, I mean, just like it does look like. I just want to quickly tangent here. It does look like Legendary Studios is making a concentrated effort to have primary strategy fatigue not be a thing in modern day Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, and well, at least ways to combat it, right?
Yeah, and
you're going to
primary
print
strategy
Warhorn.
being the key word there too.
Yeah, if you're going to print Warhorn, let's give us, Quiver of Abyssal Death.
Yeah.
But like, so the first line of text is what really interests me about Riptide, which is whenever you play a card from hand, you may put a card from your hand face down into your arsenal. This feels like a really abusable ability, I think, a way that you can. So there's these traps and those are great, and I think those are going to be really relevant. Like the blue traps, really good, right? Like they're blues, they're resources, and then you can use them as abilities. So I think the way that I would look to build Riptide initially is to really build around that first line of the text. Whenever you play a card from hand, you may put a card from your hand face down into your arsenal. Look at cards like Death Touch. Look at arrows. Look at this hybrid kind of attack action and arrow attack action sort of build, and really utilize that along with. I guess you're probably playing his bow, but maybe you're just playing Death Dealer, not sure. And looking at this kind of route for playing Riptide, and it probably will end up being a little bit more mid-rangey than I would like, but I think it's going to be, I would be really proactive with how I look to build Riptide straight away, at least.
I do want to talk about Barb Castaway, which is the bow. It says it's a ranger bow, two-handed. It's can be played with any ranger. It says once per turn instant, one resource, you may put an arrow card from your hand face up into your arsenal, and then it has another once per turn instant, one resource, you may put a face down arrow in your arsenal face up. If you do, put an aim counter on it. We did see a lot of aim counter stuff come out recently, and it didn't really take. Do you think that this helps facilitate that that suite of ranger cards?
100%. I think the problem I had with like Sandscour is what you had to do to sort of set it up, and Death Dealer being so strong. But I think this ability to basically arsenal cards, use Riptide's ability, which is way more interesting to me. Have a card face down your arsenal and turn it face up to get the aim counter to start the turn, things like that. I think there's a lot more play with it, and to pay 1 to get the aim counter, basically because all these new cards you've seen, the aim counter is like a slight buff. It's like gets +1, so you're paying 1 resource to get like a +1 attack. Like that feels like a pretty good return. So if you can find a way to make it consistent, to make it not too awkward with how you're playing Riptide or any other ranger, and being able to use Barb Castaway, I think it's going to be pretty good. I think the question just comes back to, is it good enough to be better than like Death Dealer, or Lexi has Voltaire, which is just such a crazy bow. So is Barb Castaway going to be more of a Riptide and maybe some sort of Azalea build thing?
Yeah, and our aim counter's worth an entire resource, and it's not even that. It's not even, you also have to jump through the hoop of flipping the face down arrow face up. Hey, now I want to ask you about Trench's Sucking Treasure, which is the legendary ranger equipment chest with 1 defense, Blade Break. It says once per turn instant, put a face down card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck, gain 1 resource, and has Arcane Barrier 1. I think this card is really good.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting because you're giving up a card for a resource, and is that what you want to be doing? That's
I think so. If you're playing something like, let's look at Azalea, right? Let's look at like traditional Azalea. Sometimes can have trouble utilizing every single card in his hand because it doesn't have a lot of access to Gogan, and it offsets this with the non-attack actions that you try to pump your big arrow with. I think that this can kind of help that deck, when it gets a bit clunky, right, and you're kind of free rolling a resource off your arsenal card, I'm not like, you're not going to want to put your arsenal card in the bottom of your deck every single time, of course, but because you're like refueling with something like Death Dealer, like I think this card is really, really, really good.
Yeah, it's going to come down to how about like sort of what this enables you to do from a consistency standpoint, as opposed to what this does from like a card for a resource is a bad trade, right? Trading a card for one resource is effectively a bad trade. But as time and time again with Flesh and Blood, things that are really moldable, things that are really like flexible and can offer you consistency are powerful. So that's kind of, to your point, I think where the opportunities are with a card like Trench. It's a bit of a nombo with a card like Skullbone Crosswrap, because you can't flip that up opt and then put this card to the bottom. This card has to be face down with Trench, so looks more appealing with New Horizon or something.
Yeah, put a face down card from your arsenal. So does it work well with New Horizons?
Yeah, well, New Horizons, you can put the second card, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, I'm interested to see how good Trench really is. I think time and time again with Ranger, the complication is like hoops, like you said before, jumping through hoops, and Trench looks like another one where you do have to jump through a bit of a hoop. So is it at the end of the day going to be better than just playing Tunic? Not sure. We'll see.
I think if I had to like gamble on a card in Outsiders as like kind of a breakout card, this would be my wild card right here. Like it's not like, oh my god, this is busted, like Death Touch or something like that, but I think this could be incredibly good, to be honest. I think you could be gaining a resource almost every single turn and maybe getting, turboing through your deck. You can basically indiscriminately put a card in your arsenal because you're going to be cashing in for a resource. Now you're refueling with Death Dealer and et cetera, et cetera.
Compare it to Crown of Seeds. That's the only thing I'll say. Just compare it to Crown of Seeds. Yeah, you could be right. We'll definitely see. Why don't we talk about, let's talk about some traps, and let's talk about after that some of these cards that give the buffs. What are your kind of takes on the new traps we've seen? Like, do you think that my kind of assessment of Riptide is maybe a bit more online in terms of these traps will go in your deck, but it's not going to be the focus of the thing? Or do you actually think that you focus on that second sort of text and you really focus on these blue legendary traps, the tar pit trap, you bring the traps in from Crucible of War? Like, what do you think it looks like?
Yeah, it's tough. Like, Riptide is actually pretty hard for me to evaluate from like 10,000 feet, and it does actually look just a little bit bad, to be honest. Like, the thing is like the most powerful traps are Riptide specialization. Like, I would love to play some of these traps in like an Azalea deck or a Lexi deck and use them as like sort of a mid-range blue. So it's like the payoff for playing Riptide, I think, is having access to these cards more than it is his hero ability, to be honest.
So here's a question for you. How good is, say, Azalea's hero ability?
Honestly, I think it's pretty good.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, because like if you're looking at cards like Red in the Ledger, if you presented a Red in the Ledger to an aggro deck, they would block it like every single time, right? But the reason that thing hits is because you're able to give it Dominate.
I guess my point I'm trying to get to is, and I do agree. Like, I think Azalea's ability is good. I do agree, but you could effectively play an Azalea deck in a Riptide shell, play these specializations, and get that kind of relevancy for in-game purposes of that last kind of line of text. Like a blue that turns into a defense reaction that blocks for 3 and has relevant text is really powerful. There's a reason these are legendary.
It's a good point. I think you might be right there, actually. Like if you think about it, like Azalea is hitting with nasty on hit triggers via the Dominate, but honestly, if you're just presenting threats and ripping 2 to 3 cards out of your opponent, say you're playing Azalea or Riptide against an aggro deck, like that's good enough. So if you have the additional bonus of having these kind of cards in your deck, yeah, maybe it is a better Azalea deck. You do lose the Azalea specialization cards, which are also pretty freaking good. So, but it's a great point. I think that's like very valid.
We'll see. I mean, it's something that it's just the way I would look at Riptide to start with, and to be honest, I think Azalea looks pretty good. Why don't we talk about some of the cards that I think is the reason for this, and that's some of these pumps that Azalea is going to get, as well as, of course, some of the new arrows. But like, why don't we start with some of these like pump spells that have on-hit effects? So we've got these, like we did with Assassin, we've got these red line sort of 0 for 3s effectively. They were attack reactions in Assassin. Now for Ranger, they're non-attack actions. So Lace with Blood Rod is one that says a 0 cost red Ranger action at rare that says your next arrow attack this turn gets +3 attack, and when this hits, create a Blood Rot Pox token under their control, representing a 0 for 5 like we talked about. And if that has Dominate with Azalea's ability, giving that arrow, that seems pretty good.
Yeah, I think these are great. I think this is this is what that deck kind of wanted more of. Definitely, because you see some of those Azalea decks now. I think some of them even play like freaking Nimblism and stuff, just to try to keep pumping those arrows. And this is just way more effective than that. Because this is effectively 0-5, and then you have Lace with Inertia, which is also fantastic. So I think user cards are really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, even Lace with Frailty, right? Like, you come into this go wide aggro deck, you pump a go tall dominate arrow, and it's like, cool, you can block with one of those, attacks if you want, but then your weapon's getting -1, your attack action you want to play from Arsenal's getting -1. Like, I think Frailty does seem like the weakest, but
it is, yeah.
All of these are relevant.
You can see that Frailty is the weakest actually via the Codex design, because Codex of Frailty has by far the most powerful effect, in my opinion, over Blood Rot and Inertia.
Good call out, actually. Any of these arrows pique your interest outside of, the aim counter sort of ability? I know there's the 0-for-3 with Go Again. If you have an aim counter, it gets +1, or Sky Shot.
It's called Falcon Wing.
Falcon Wing.
And that one actually doesn't impress me that much, to be honest. Because of things like Rain Razors exist, it just seems like way worse than Rain Razors. Rain
Razors?
Right? Rain Razors? No, not Rain Razors. You know what I'm talking about. The one that comes back to your hand, the 0-for-4.
Oh, Endless Arrow.
Endless Arrow. I guess it says Go Again, so it's a different effect. Yeah. It's tough. Maybe maybe like Head Jab with, because I don't think the aim counter thing it doesn't seem like you would pay, or you would jump through the hoop of getting an aim counter for just a single point of damage. So maybe the 0-for-3 itself is good enough. I don't know.
It looks like a limited card to me, I'll be honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, 0-for-3 Go Again limited. We all know that's good.
Sedation Shot is interesting. This is the 1-for-5, and it's when it hits a hero, create an inertia token under the control. That one looks interesting to me, specifically for, I think, Rangers trying to deal with playing to 5-card hand decks. I think, a 1-for-5 it's already on rate, and then has this ability that create an inertia token if it hits, and then it also, if you have an aim counter, gets +1. I mean, look, there's so many interesting, I think, arrows to look at. Widowmaker is another one as well, although I mean, the defense reaction can't be played to Widowmaker's Chain Link. That's potentially interesting. I think I'm excited to look at Azalea, and I think basically the way I'm going to look at it is definitely very much go tall. I'm going to look at utilizing these Lace with cards, and that's probably where I'm going to start, at least.
Widowmaker is by far the most interesting one to me, to answer your question. This like barraging beatdown effect for a 1-for-7, super good.
Yeah, someone pointed this out to me very quickly, though, is that it does say defended by fewer than 2 cards. It doesn't say non-equipment cards.
Poo. Yeah, you're right.
So, block with
that's way different. That's way different than that might sound like a small content, like I don't know what you would call it, but yeah, a small difference, but that's huge actually. That makes Widowmaker way worse. I did not notice that.
The last one I want to shout out is Spire Sniping. This is the 1-for-5 Ranger action arrow attack, and it says when Spire Sniping is put or turned face up into an arsenal, look at the top 2 cards of your deck and put them back in any order. I think that's really interesting with Azalea's ability, set up a potential dominate sort of push. That card is another one that I'm going to be definitely looking at if I'm looking at Azalea. A lot of competition for arrows now. What about, just quickly on, I guess, Ranger, any of these hybrid cards that look interesting for Ranger? I mean, I'll come back to Death Touch again. I think that card looks very, very interesting. I mean, Toxicity, if you're able to push the dominate, obviously it doesn't give +2 attack, so I'm more interested in a card like Lace with Blood Rot Pox, but Toxicity could be, this is where I think you're going to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, not much to say for me on terms of the, what we haven't already said for the hybrid cards.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think so either. Virulent Touch, as people call the Post Malone card. I don't think that's particularly of interest. We do have these red line traps as well, so maybe if you are going trap heavy, these are going to be of interest, but these look a lot less exciting to me, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm happy to finally get the confirmation with what seems like confirmation with the Trapperata. The traps were bad all along, and that we weren't just incorrect as a community.
Okay, let's move on to Ninja, because I know you're bursting at the seams to talk about Katsu. You're a big Katsu fan. First of all, are you happy that we get the reprints? I mean, we talked about it last week. We were pretty certain that we're going to see Head Jab and Surging Strike. They are confirmed, and Twin Twisters, they are in the set.
Am I happy we're getting the reprints? Not for like the sake of acquiring the cards, but for the sake of limited, yeah, for sure. I mean, Come to Fight is also in the set, which is a freaking crazy limited card. And yeah, I mean, Ravenous Rebel as well. But I do think that Ninja does seem to be, it's hard to say that Ninja's the biggest winner because Ranger does get things like Death Touch and like the Quivers. Like Quivers are just strict upgrades, but I was looking for a design for a Ninja specifically that didn't just feel like a side grade, because I feel like that's what's been plaguing Katsu. Yep. And I do think that this set has executed well and has drastically reduced some of the variance that you would experience while playing something like Katsu, which makes it more attractive to me, to be honest.
Yep, I am very excited about Katsu. I have a question for you, and is Katsu now the best aggro deck in Flesh and Blood?
I think it's very possible. I think it's very, very possible. It's hard to say. It's really hard to say at this point, but it's very resilient to fatigue, right? And that's quite good. And yeah, I don't know. It looks consistent, which is also very important for the qualifications to be the best aggro deck.
I think so. Let's go through some of these lines, because as per when we get to Katsu, we get lines, kick lines, punch lines, whatever it is. But we've got, like you say, it's not side grades this time. It is like upgrades and additions to some pretty interesting effects, I think. So let's talk about, I guess, the Surging Strike line. So traditionally, Surging Strike, Gust Wave, Mugenchi Release, Lord of Wind, it can be a little bit unexciting at times, especially because the damage output is not particularly that high once you get to Lord of Wind. It's more about the threat of activation. But now we get Descendant Gust Wave, which is at red is a 1-for-3. It does have a cycle. And it says combo, if Surging Strike was the last attack of this combat chain, this costs 1 less to play and it has +2. So a 0-for-5 if this comes up after a Surging Strike. That's a pretty good return rate. It reminds me of, obviously, Rising Knee Thrust. It's the same return rate if you've played Surging Strike.
Yeah, I actually have a diagram here for like all the different combo lines now. Cool. But yeah, Descendant Gust Wave into Bonds of Ancestry into Dishonor, and you can also go Surging Strike into Whelming Gust Wave into Mugenchi into Bonds of Industry, I think it's Mugenchi into Bonds of Industry into Dishonor, but or it's Whelming into Bonds into Dishonor.
Yes.
I believe. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So what do you think? Let's talk about that. Bonds of Ancestry. This card is super. I mean, we talked about it when we saw the preview, but now with the context of this, the new Gust Wave and how powerful that looks, Bonds of Ancestry looks very exciting. If you haven't seen this already, go and check out. There's a lot of text on this card, but effectively, it's a 2-for-4 at red. But if a card with Gust Wave name was the last card on the combat chain, it costs 2 less. It has Go Again, and when this attacks, you may banish a card with combo from your graveyard. If you do, search your deck for a card with the same name, banish it, and then shuffle. You may play it this combat chain. So, let's say you've already got a Dishonor in your graveyard. Obviously, you go get a Dishonor, but you could even just go and get like, a red Fosterfist or something, from your deck. If you've got a blue Fosterfist in your graveyard, banish the blue, go get the red, and it's a 0-for-4. You've just literally, Bonds of Ancestry becomes a 0-for-4 with Go Again that also goes and gets you a 0-for-4.
This card is busted.
It's really good.
It's busted. Like, it's beyond good, to be honest.
Like, it's not when it hits either, it's when it attacks.
And I love how it says a card with Gust Wave. It's not even that freaking specific. Like,
no. It can be Descendant Gust Wave. So the line now, okay, you have a blue in your hand, you come in with your Kodachi, you play your Surging Strike, so you're at 2 cards so far. You play your Descendant Gust Wave, you're at 3 cards for 10 damage. You play your Bonds of Ancestry, which also costs, your 4 cards for 14 damage, potentially 18 damage off your 4 cards. Like, that is 19 with the Kodachi. That's huge.
Dude, this card is also going to eat people limited. Like, this card is so good. Yeah, I mean, this is what we talk about. This is a straight up upgrade for Katsu. Super powerful, like the 0-for-4, and then going to grab that Flusterfist like you talked about, or if you have the 1 floating resource, maybe you go grab, like, I don't know, your extra, what would you call it, spinning.
You could go get another Descendant Gust Wave. Yeah. I mean, it's not as good because it's a 3 cost, but like that ability is going to need to be relevant to cards being in graveyard, and that, sometimes you're going to draw this and it's going to be a 2-for-4 that defense for 3, and that's going to be really awkward. But I think that the power level is increased. Not necessarily the consistency with this line, but some of the consistency in the other lines gets increased. But also because you have this could come off a Whelming Gust Wave as well, so that does help with consistency.
I think that decks would play this card if it blocked for 2, which is like the highest praise I can give any card in Flesh and Blood.
Probably. It's going to be really interesting to see just how good this card is. And obviously cards that block for 3 and Ninja is good. Like you want those because there's a lot of 2 blocks obviously. Let's talk about the head jab line. So obviously head jab traditionally is probably the weakest of the original Katsu lines. Head jab into open the center. I want to say it's called.
Yep, that's
into
it.
Pounding Gale was the last on that one.
So we've head jab into open the center, into pounding gale or fluster fist, and we also have head jab now into 1-2 punch and into recoil. So
I love this 1-2 punch. You want to read it out?
Yep. Go for it. You got it.
Yeah, sure. So it's a 0 for 3 with combo. It says if head jab is the last attack this combat chain, when this hits, a hero deal 2 damage to them. So threatening a 0 for 5. Obviously it's 0 for 3, but it has go again, so it's an effective another head jab that's representing 2 damage. And then what's the line after that? That's the
after 1-2 punch
recoil, right? We got recoil after
so
that.
Recoil is the optional other one, right? So you can go recoil, 0 cost. We're looking at red, 0 for 3, blocks for 3, combo. If head jab was the last attack this combat chain this has, when this hits a hero, they put a card from their hand on top of their deck. That's good. That's freaking good. Like, I mean, this is so much better than what we were dealing with in terms of Katsu cards before. Like, head jab is a legit line I think you could put into your deck.
Yeah. The problem I see with this line, right, is it's all 0 for 3s, which if your opponent wants to defend, that's not particularly great. If your opponent does not want to defend and they have a lot of 2 blocks in the deck, then these lines become a lot more appealing. Obviously, I think like Art of War with these lines looks really good. You could probably pair these with 100 Wins lines. You've got Be Like Water, which is Be Like Water we haven't talked about, but this is the card that helps give you the consistency, right? Because it's a 0 for 3, and it has when this hits, you may pay 1 resource, and if you do, you can choose Head Jab, Surging Strike, or Twin Twisters, and Be Like Water gets that name.
It's my favorite card in this, in the entire set.
Very cool.
Yeah,
very cool. You can have this a Surging Strike that costs that you won effectively. That's very interesting.
Hayden, I got to get your thoughts on this card. Silverwind Shuriken. This is a ninja action shuriken item. At Majestic, it's blue, costs 0. It's an item, by the way. So, and then it says attack reaction doesn't defend you, right? Attack reaction, destroy Silverwind Shuriken, target attack action card with combo, gains +1. How interesting is this? And are you thinking like, is there any sort of this is definitely good against defensive decks, right? You stack these up over the course of the game, and you have your sort of one go off game to, I guess, get over the line. But what do you? This is new. This is a ninja specific item that now sits in board and threatens the activation of the +1. It's sort of a Amulet of Earth, right?
Yeah. So that's first of all, art on this card. Freaking sweet. Maybe might be one of my favorite art. The ninja art is my favorite art, I think, in this. And wow, it's close. But visiting the floating dojo is also great art. But anyway, that aside, I compared this to Amulet of Earth to start with, and I was like, Amulet of Earth triggers for the whole potential combat chain, getting 2 or 3 attacks +1. But then I thought, hold up, the what you're triggering these on, the on hit effects that this can push over the line is huge, right? Like we just talked about, recoil, for instance. We talked about the 1-2 punch. What's the one that gives 2 2 damage? 1-2 punch. There's Mugenshi release. There's Hurricane Technique, which is a card that I friggin' love. And you can potentially turn this Silverwind Shuriken into +1 damage, another card.
Yeah, Whelming Gust Wave, just classics that draw cards, and just permanent.
It's a threat. It's always there.
Permanent threat of activation. Yeah, I think we know this. We're very accustomed to this after Pro Tour Leo, when we were I think we were some of the only people playing Amulet of Earth, and it was dude, how freaking good was that card? It was maybe because people were seeing that card for the first time, but my opponents got blown out by freaking Amulet of Earth every single time. It was ridiculous.
Yeah. So I think the way that then I thought about, okay, how would I play against this card? Well, I just let it hit immediately. That's exactly what happens. I just block for 3, and I present my opponent the opportunity to immediately pop this and get the value out of it. And then I was like, okay, that's fine, But then what if they don't do that? Then okay, I've blocked out their line. That's good. But then they've still got the threat of activation, and they can still find the best possible spot to use it. And that. Overall, I think the card is good. It's going to be playable. It's 0 cost, so it works with Kadachi. It doesn't defend, which is relevant.
Doesn't
but
have
this
go
on,
again itself, so you have
doesn't have go again. But turn 0 or the end of a chain. But you can
end of chain.
There's lines where you're okay, Kadachi, leg tap, and then your opponent's okay, let the leg tap hit, block the Kadachi. I'm ready to stop your rising knee thrust. And you're boom, Silverwind Shuriken pass.
Yeah. Honestly, in that case, I might ditch the Silverwind Shuriken to Katsu's ability, go grab my rising knee. But
sure,
this card is good. This card, This card is good. I just don't know if it's. Yeah, I mean the fact that it pitches for Kadachis in his blue is great, but not defending is tough. I mean, I think not defending is a meta dependent kind of card that you play. Like
there's a lot of things we could talk about. We could go down like the Twin Twisters route, and
that's what I'm talking about, though. That there is so much to talk about because freaking Outsiders for Ninja is awesome. I mean, honestly, the whole set design, I think that I haven't played with it yet, but they knocked it out of the park. Like I haven't seen something this cool in a long time. But with Ninja specifically, I mean, this stuff is great.
I do want to talk about the new kick line quickly, but I just want to point out one thing. We talked a couple of weeks ago, and we had a question from the Commander Cookout section, which is, what does Katsu need to be good? And we talked about these no side grades, upgrades, but the other thing that we talked about is Katsu's ability is very, very good. You need cards that can make sure that when you have that threat of activation and you hit with that card to trigger it, you are going to get value out of it. And now with the power of these lines, that's going to happen. You know, it's not like, oh, look, they have no red one with Gust Waves left in the deck now. I don't have to worry about the Katsu ability. No. I've got Descendant Gust Wave now. So making Katsu's ability good is what is kind of exciting about the set.
Yes, I do think that. I do think this will be I do think it'll be the best aggro deck. I do, to answer your original question.
Well, that was actually a claim by Jason Long. People may know we've had him on the pod before. He's I want to say like 4 or 5 time calling top 8 player. He was a Katsu stan in the original sort of Welcome to Wraith days. He said, Katsu's back to being the best aggro deck, baby. Cyclone Roundhouse. Is this card busted?
Cyclone Roundhouse. All right, just read it out for everybody.
I'll read it out. So Cyclone Roundhouse is a yellow majestic, cost 2, ninja attack action, defense 3, attacks of 5, and it has combo. If Spinning Wheel Kick was the last attack this combat chain, this has, at the beginning of the reaction step, banish a random defending card from each chain link. Now, if there's equipment on the chain link...
I didn't think about that. That's ridiculous.
So, yes, this can banish something from the current chain link, you know, to push damage through, which is great. But also, the other thing this can do is banish potential equipment from a really long chain link. Maybe one was thrown in front of a Kadachi, for instance.
The shield. Yes, the shield.
It's gone.
Yes. That's so good. Dude. Oh, wow. The last check.
It's at least very cool.
Let me reread this. If Spinning Wheel Kick was the last attack this combat chain, this has, at the beginning of the reaction step, so it doesn't even have to hit. Okay.
No.
Katsu controls back, baby. It's back.
So let me take you through a line, because Spinning Wheel Kick is effectively League Tap with text, which is great because it's a 1 for 4 at red, blocks 2, has natural go again, but also has combo, which is really cool. So this is a card you could go and get potentially with your what do we talk about for with your Bonds of Ancestry? But anyway, that aside, Spinning Wheel Kick is combo. If Twin Twisters or Spinning Wheel Kick was the last attack this combat chain, it has +1, and when this hits, put it on the bottom of its owner's deck. You know, again, anti-fatigue kind of stuff, some really interesting stuff there. Gets +1, can be a 1 for 5 if you play your second Spinning Kick on top of this. Already really powerful. Then all of a sudden, okay, come with my Kadachi, come in with my second Kadachi, my opponent's like, all right, gotta block that with this piece of equipment, you know, with my shield. Spinning Wheel Kick, and then you're like, all right, I'm gonna pitch the next card, Cyclone Roundhouse, just come in here. There's already 4 chain links, maybe there's 1 or 2 equipment on these chains. You're gonna banish a card on this to push more damage as well if they try and block it. Like, it's really interesting at the very least, and does look quite powerful because Spinning Wheel Kick is in itself just a good return. Yeah,
this is great because I think one of the biggest issues was remind me the name of the Guardian Shield. Now I'm forgetting names.
It is Ram's Head.
Ram's Head.
Such a nightmare for Katsu.
Yeah, I think that honestly, like, this makes me so excited for Katsu Control and Katsu Midrange that abuses Flick Flack. Like, I think Flick Flack has just gone up in stock again. Because honestly, Flick Flack, dude, the only reason why Flick Flack isn't being played right now is because that stupid shield, and then Katsu being a little bit less powerful than the other, fast decks. Yeah. And if we're able to negate those problems with better Katsu cards and this new card that deletes the shield effectively, oh my god, Flick Flack is back, baby. Or everybody's going to learn how toxic
you can play
that
around
card,
it, right?
That card is. I mean, they can definitely try to play around it, but I think that the danger comes in when they're blocking the first Kadachi, which is when they use it. So, I mean, it's hard to play around.
Crown the second Kadachi, take the first one. Yeah, there will be ways to play around it.
But now they're leaking damage. Is their shield even good?
Sure. Yep. Yeah. But are we playing Fatigue Ultimate anyway? Anyway, at the very least, it's very interesting, and I'm excited. What I'm most excited about as throwing my Welcome to Wraith boomer age here, is going back to playing these like just good card Katsu decks, just like Kodachi, threat, or Kodachi, leg tap, threat. Like, that was one of my favorite ways to play Katsu. It was just this like tempo-based kind of way. Maybe I have some flick likes on my sideboard to bring in for aggro matchups. Maybe I've got a couple of like combo lines, and then maybe I'm just playing a pure damage. Like, Katsu is such a cool hero where you can do a lot of stuff with, and I'm glad that Katsu looks like it's back.
Yeah, I agree with you.
All right, let's move on to wrap up our kind of first take on Outsiders and Class Constructed. Let's look at some of these generics. Actually, do you want to talk about any of the equipment? I mean, obviously, like we've got Flick Knives, which is the Assassin Ninja equipment arms.
Yeah, how do we deduce how that works against Crown of Seeds?
They're not good, not well.
Not good.
This one doesn't work well, but the Van Brace does. So if you use this against Crown of Seeds, you would lose your dagger because if you haven't seen Flick Knives, it's a once per turn attack reaction. It's Assassin Ninja equipment and arms, blade break, 1 defense. Once per turn attack reaction, 0. Target dagger you control that isn't on the active chain link deals 1 damage to target hero. If damage is dealt this way, the dagger is hit. Full stop. Destroy the dagger. So as soon as you activate this ability, you're going to be losing the dagger, whether the damage is prevented or not, or whatever happens with the damage. Like it doesn't need to hit. Dagger's going to get destroyed. So yeah, I mean, what's more interesting to me about this is that like this is like an extender for the end game. It already has blade break 1, so you could use it as an iron rot in a pinch if you needed to, or in the end game situation, you could basically throw or damage at your opponent. Throw your Kodachis over 2 turns to deal 1 damage.
Yeah, I think we should get into the generics because there's a card I want to talk to you about.
You want to talk about Van Brace quickly first, though?
Okay, yeah, go for it. This is the anti crown, eh?
Yeah, so I'm trying to find who Van Brace is back on.
Van Brace's Determination, legendary generic equipment arms, defense for 0, sets once per turn attack reaction, 1 resource. The next prevention effect that prevents damage this turn prevents 1 less of that damage. And it also has when this defends, you may pay 1 if you do against +1 in blade rake, which means that at the end of the combat chain or when it closes, you destroy it.
Basically, its second ability is Ironhide, effectively for 1.
Yeah.
Defense. But the first ability, is this just literally an anti-Crown of Seeds card?
Yes, so the crown...
But it costs 1.
Yeah, it costs 1. I mean, that's the problem, right? So you need to have this like additional superfluous resource that you can just sink into this. It's still important, right? Because the threat of activation here, like they crown... Well, can they crown... No, because then you can... If they're trying to use crown to dodge it on hit trigger, you can react with this, right? I'm trying to think about how the priority of this works.
I think on hit effects, this is where this can be relevant. Potentially like spectral shields as well, whatever Prism looks like with Dust of Dawn or in Blitz, or this card does have other relevant things outside of just Crown of Seeds. But that is kind of the one that comes to mind immediately. And is it going to be good? I don't know. It's something interesting, and I think decks that want to combat potential Crown of Seeds fatigue and looking for creative ways to use their resources. This is something that could be that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, generics. Gore belching. So, gore belching. Majestic. Red, 0 cost, 7 attack, no defense. When this attacks, reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal an attack action card. If you do, banish it, and this gets -X, where X is the attack of the card banished this way. Otherwise, this gets -7, shuffle. What do you think?
The last part of that text is really relevant. Otherwise, this gets -7. So you have to hit something. You can't just play this with no other attacks. You can't do the old, I'm playing Kano with 1 gore belching. It's not going to work, unfortunately. Is this card good? So you need to find a deck where you're going to... So let's say you're playing a red line aggro deck with like we just talked about hit jabs, right? So if that's the best attack in your deck, for the most part, maybe you've got a few outliers, but you've got a lot of hit jabs in your deck. Okay, this is a 0 for 4. There's no go again. It's not particularly great. So it's a 0-4 with no hit effect, so it's worse than something like Snatch. So you need to find ways for this to be relevant, like for like a -1 or -2, right? So you can get this for 0 for 5 or 0 for 6. And how do you do that? That's the question.
If it hits any of your blues, you're it's great, right? Like, I mean, so if like the floor is 0 for 3, and then,
0 for 5 as a ceiling is not particularly good.
Well, it'd be like 0 for 6 if it hit your blue.
Well, if you're attack for 1. But I'm thinking in things like my Runeblade sprung to mind, Spellblade Assault and things like that. Like 0 for 5, that's not particularly interesting, I think. So it needs to really be 0 for 6, I think.
Yeah.
But Rouse the Ancients, that's the card that comes to mind, right? If you can flip off Rouse the Ancients from this, so it becomes in for full 7, that's huge.
I feel like this card is very interesting to me. And also the concept of digging through your deck until you hit an attack action card and then banishing it. Like, just something about that seems like I'm just like, can we abuse this? Is there anything going on here? Like, my inkling is no, but it's interesting.
Yeah. It's the one I've definitely spent a little bit of time thinking about, but there's other cards that have been, I would say, a bit more interesting to me. Like Wreak Havoc. That's a quite interesting one. That's the 2/6 at red. Defense reactions can't be played to Wreak Havoc's Chainlink. And when this hits a hero, you may turn a card in their arsenal face up, then destroy a defense reaction in their arsenal. So, just another, it's like Command and Conquer light. Again, seen the memes. We have Command and Conquer. No, we have Command and Conquer at home. It's Wreak Havoc.
Yeah. What about, what do you think of Give and Take? So, I'll read it out. Red, 1 cost, 3 attack, 3 defense. Whenever Give and Take is defended by an action card, you may put an action card with cost less than Give and Take's attack, which, by the way, is 3, from your graveyard on top of your deck.
Yeah. Again, the fact it's defense for 3 is relevant. It does cost 1. I think if this cost 0, it would be like going into a lot of decks, so it makes sense that it costs 1. Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, this into then like Ravenous Rebel is really cool, right? Okay, I'm going to put my power red attack that I want for next turn. Maybe it's just another, go again attack or whatever. And then you would play a Ravenous Rebel and reveal it red, for instance. Like, just ensuring that Ravenous Rebel comes in for 4. But 1 for 3 is not particularly exciting, right? Like that card that you put on top needs to be really, really relevant, I think.
Yeah. What? Defended by an action. So, what about against Fatigue, though? Like, is it just Silver Bullet? Like, how does Fatigue beat this card?
They just don't block it.
They don't block it. So, yeah, I mean, you
don't block the defense reaction.
Yeah. You'd obviously sandbag it until they're out of those cards, because usually,
but then what are you putting on top?
Give and Takes. Cost
like,
less.
Blood Rush Bellows is a card that comes to mind if you put this in Brute, for instance. But it's like, first they have to block with it. Like, Cadaverous Contraband is probably just a better card.
Yeah, cost less than Give and Take's attack, which is 3. Can you not just loop Give and Takes? You can loop it, right?
Sure. Yeah, you can. If they defend this with an action card. That's true.
Okay, so that seems gas. Like, if you just sandbag this until the end game, like, it just seems like Silver Bullet-esque against Fatigue. Let me know in the comments if, tell me how Fatigue beats this card. I know, and don't say just play a defense reaction, because you would sandbag this until as late as possible.
Well, you just give up 3 life. That's how you beat it. You give up 6 life to get 2 of them.
Ideally, you're playing it when they're on lower life. And that's significant. If a Fatigue deck is just losing 3 life against you, that's crazy, right? Like, if a Fatigue deck has to unconditionally just not block this, that's a super, super powerful card. And then you just remember and saying this bad boy back, and dude, we're in business against Fatigue.
I think the problem is that it's red. You're gonna have to play it early or pitch it. I'd be interested to see what people think, but from my standpoint, I'm not sure this is quite the answer. This feels like last ditch effort. I'll be honest with you.
Okay,
a little bit.
I think it's
the bucket I'm putting it in.
I think this card is like a borderline Silver Bullet against Fatigue, but I could be just misunderstanding it.
You've played multiple of them, right? You've played probably 3.
Yeah, most likely, but I think you can get away with 2.
All right. Any other cards you want to touch on? I mean, there's some really interesting generics in this, like Brush Off, which is the damage prevention one. Humble, which is the 2-cost attacks for 6 at red at rare. When this is a hero, they lose all abilities until the end of their next turn. So it's like Sleep Dart, but on a generic attack. That's interesting. The card I've been sort of building up to talk about is looking for a scrap though. Looking for a scrap, which is a 1-cost generic attack action at red. It attacks for 4, defense for 2. This is as an additional cost to play. Looking for a scrap, you may banish a card with 1 attack from your graveyard. When you do, this gains +1 attack and go again.
This is a freaking limited all-star, by the way.
Yeah, but has this got constructed potential? Like,
I think so.
Is there?
Yep.
Because you just talked about cards, blue cards with 1 cost for gore belching. Well, they're also going to work for looking for a scrap, and in I would say in a better way potentially.
Yeah, looking for a scrap. Like 1 for 5, go again. In the later game, last guess once you developed a bit of graveyard. I think this card is incredibly good. Are you thinking this is just kind of okay? Because this seems crazy powerful.
I think it's either going to be unplayable or really, really good. Because either you're going to have a deck that can service this really well with, the misses. Like the first card I thought it was Blue Belittle, which is obviously no longer around. But like, if you've got a deck that's able to play maybe 9 to 12 blue one power attacks, like this card becomes really interesting, I think. But is there a deck that can do that and not have to change the way it looks to do so? Like Ninja is one, right?
Yes,
like,
Ninja.
Could this be a Ninja deck that's just like all my blues combo cards that like have one attack or whatever, and then I have this looking for a scrap? Like, is that good? Maybe. I guess we'll find out.
Seems pretty freaking good.
All right, I think we've run pretty long on our first takes on Outsiders for Classic Constructed. I don't know if there's anything else you want to kind of talk about. I mean, just my overall takeaway is that this is going to be really interesting for what Constructed looks like. I think we've got some ways to tackle, particularly Icelander, I think. Like, the Rangers were already pretty good into Icelander, I think, which is good. I think the Assassins can be good there as well. My concern is still going to be around what happens with the 4-man Ultim. Like, Ultim still looks like it's going to be really good. I'm more thinking like proactive Ultim. But I'm excited to get into this. Katsu is one that particularly piques my interest, I think, if Ultim can't be super flexible.
Yeah. No, I agree with you there. I think that overall the set looks really, really good for Constructed. Like, it's been a while since we've done a review, and I've had this kind of feeling from a set in regards to its potential constructed impact. It is coming into a tough constructed meta, right? Like one where Oldhim exists, Frostbites exist. Like, it's hard for a lot of design to sort of percolate when those are present in the meta, but it looks powerful. Looks very powerful.
Yeah, let's not forget Briar's still around. Like,
I would be happy to play the Katsu deck into Briar, to be honest. Like, not looking at these Katsu cards, like the thing I'm most worried about in terms of like this deck not making a huge impact on the meta is Ice Heroes, is things like Oldhim. If it's going up head to head against another aggro deck like Briar, I think it looks like it can definitely make an impact.
I think we have our first Outsiders gameplay video, Brendan, right there and there.
Yeah, for sure.
Katsu versus Briar. I want to wrap up the show. Want to let you know as well, we've touched on Constructed. Next week is all about Limited. We've got our Limited set review for Outsiders dropping. The pod will be coming early, so you'll have that well and truly before pre-release to dive into and understand, kind of what are our takes on the Limited format and what are the cards that we, get some assessment of cards to play for your pre-release. Of course, as I said at the top of the show, we have a new podcast dropping on Arsenal Pass as well. Limited time only. I've got Yuanji joining me for episode 1. We are doing a pre-release primer, all things you need to know for winning your pre-release. Check that out. That'll be up next week as well, nice and early, so you can get that before your pre-release. I want to say a big thank you to all of our Arsenal Pass patrons. And if you want to find this guy next to me on Twitter, he's at Brendan APG. I'm at Fian_Dale. Until next week, Brendan, unless there's anything else, we're going to sign off.
Just don't forget about the giveaway that we mentioned at the top of the pod. That is a comment, like, subscribe on YouTube, or you can submit a review, or you can do both. Review gets 2x weighted. Funnier the better. RateThisPodcast.com/ArsenalPass.
See you next week.
See ya.